The iron door at the back of the sanctuary wouldn't budge. Natalie braced her foot against the wall and pulled harder, rust flaking onto her hands. When it finally gave way with a shriek of metal, she stumbled backward into a shaft of dusty light. Behind the door was a staircase leading down, and at the bottom, she could see the edge of something that didn't belong in a church basement. 2 weeks earlier, Natalie sat in the lawyer's office with damp clothes and a headache that wouldn't quit. She'd worked the opening shift at Morningside Bakery, the lunch rush at Chen's Takeout, and she still smelled like grease and yeast. Her sister Victoria wore Chanel. Her brother Marcus kept checking his Rolex. "The estate of Reverend Samuel Kimball has been settled," Mr. Brennan said, shuffling papers. "To Marcus Kimball, I leave my investment portfolio, currently valued at $420,000. To Victoria Kimball, I leave my savings and money market accounts, totaling $360,000. Victoria smiled. Marcus nodded like he'd expected exactly this. To Natalie Chun, formerly Kimball, Natalie felt them looking at her. She'd kept her ex-husband's name because changing it cost money she didn't have. Because Kevin had destroyed her credit, emptied their joint accounts, and disappeared with a woman he'd met at his company retreat, leaving Natalie with a 6-year-old daughter and $19 in checking. I leave the property at 1547 Salvation Road, known as the Old Mission Church, including the building and the half-acre lot. Silence stretched across the mahogany desk. The condemned church, Marcus said. Dad left her the condemned church. Mr. Brennan cleared his throat. The structure has been declared unsafe by the county. It would require substantial investment to renovate or significant cost to demolish. The property taxes are current, but, oh, Natalie. Victoria's voice dripped sympathy. That's awful. You can't even sell it. The foundation is cracked. The roof leaks. Remember when we were kids and Dad tried to restore it? Even he gave up. Marcus stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Well, sorry, Nat. Maybe you can sell the lot once you pay to tear the building down. What's that run, 50,000? Money she'd never have. Natalie worked 60 hours a week across 3 jobs and still couldn't cover Riley's inhaler refills without choosing between medicine and groceries. Her apartment was $745 a month, and her landlord had started making comments about reliability and patterns of late payment. Can I see it? Natalie asked quietly. Mr. Brennan handed her a manila envelope. Inside was a single iron key, heavy and old-fashioned, and a note in her father's shaking handwriting. The answers aren't always in the obvious places. Love, Dad. That night, Natalie stood in front of the Old Mission Church as the sun set. The building hunched against the sky, its white paint peeling in long strips, its steeple tilting slightly left. Boards covered the windows. A county notice declared it unsafe, do not enter. Her father had bought it 30 years ago with dreams of restoration, back when he was a young pastor full of vision. He'd spent weekends here, poking through the wreckage, talking about history and preservation. Then Mom got sick, and the medical bills piled up, and the church became just another abandoned building on Salvation Road. Natalie tried the front door. Locked. She walked the perimeter, testing boards, until she found a side window with rotted wood. She pried the board loose and climbed through. Inside, the sanctuary was a cavern of shadows. Pews sat askew, covered in bird droppings and decades of dust. The floorboards groaned under her feet. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating a pulpit that leaned drunkenly to one side. It was a disaster. Marcus was right. Tearing it down would cost more than she'd earn in a year. The lot might sell for $30,000 if she was lucky. After demolition costs, she'd have nothing. She sat on a pew. That didn't collapse and pulled out her phone. Riley's babysitter had texted, "She's asking about dinner. What should I tell her?" Natalie looked at her bank account. $67.43. Payday was Friday, 3 days away. She could make pasta work. They had butter. Maybe eggs. Her phone buzzed again. Victoria, in the family group chat. Marcus and I are planning something special with our inheritance. Dad would want us to enjoy it. Folded hands red heart. Natalie closed the message. She stood and walked through the sanctuary, testing her weight on each board. The building was dying, but it was hers. For whatever that was worth. She almost missed it. A door at the back of the sanctuary, painted the same faded white as the walls, nearly invisible in the gloom. Unlike the other doors, this one was made of iron. A heavy padlock hung from the handle. Natalie pulled out the key from the envelope. It fit. The lock clicked open, loud in the silence. She removed it and tried the handle. The door didn't move. She pulled harder, throwing her weight backward. Rust showered down. The hinges screamed. And finally, with a groan of metal that sounded almost alive, the door swung open. Behind it was a staircase, descending into darkness. Natalie turned on her phone's flashlight and started down. The stairs were stone, worn smooth in the centers. The air grew cooler with each step. At the bottom was another door, wooden this time, unlocked. She pushed it open. The flashlight beam swept across a room that shouldn't exist. Temperature-controlled lights flickered on automatically. And there, arranged on custom shelving along every wall, was a collection that made Natalie's breath catch. Artifacts. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Religious items. Chalices, manuscripts, vestments. Each labeled with careful handwriting and dates that made her head spin. She stepped closer to the nearest shelf. A silver chalice, marked Byzantine, circa 550 AD. Next to it, an illuminated manuscript page behind glass. Gospel of Mark fragment, 9th century. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The church used to be a repository before the town grew. They stored items here, important things. Natalie's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and started photographing. She had no idea if any of this was real. But if it was, if even one of these pieces was authentic, her phone died. The battery had been at 8% when she climbed through the window. In the darkness, Natalie stood surrounded by centuries of history. And for the first time since Kevin left, since her father died, since the eviction warning started, she felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. Dr. Eleanor Voss arrived at the church in a Land Rover at exactly 8 a.m., just as Natalie was unlocking the front door properly. She paid a locksmith $40 she couldn't afford. The professor from State University looked like she'd dressed for an archaeological dig. Hiking boots, canvas vest, her gray hair pulled back severely. "Miss Chen, I got your email." She stared up at the crumbling facade. "And I have to say, if this is a hoax, it's an elaborate one." "It's not a hoax." Natalie held open the door. "I don't know what it is, but it's real." She'd sent the email at 3 a.m. from the library's public computer, attaching the photos she'd taken before her phone died. She'd titled it, "Religious Artifacts Found in Church Basement. Authentication Needed." She'd expected nothing. Dr. Voss had responded in 4 hours. Now the professor followed her through the sanctuary, stepping carefully around weak floorboards. At the iron door, she paused. This was sealed, padlocked. I inherited the key, and no one knew what was down there. If they did, they never told me. Dr. Voss descended the stairs like she was entering a temple. When the lights flickered on and she saw the collection, she went completely still. Then she pulled out white cotton gloves and approached the first shelf with reverence. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is, Miss Chun. Do you understand what you have here? I was hoping you could tell me. This chalice alone." She examined it through a magnifying glass, checking the base, the rim. "This is documented Byzantine work. Museums have been searching for pieces from this era for decades. And this manuscript fragment," her voice broke, "this could rewrite our understanding of early gospel transmission." Natalie's legs felt weak. She sat on the bottom step. "Worth what? I need to authenticate everything properly. Bring in specialists. But based on what I'm seeing." Dr. Voss turned to her, eyes bright. $15 million. Possibly 20. These aren't just valuable, they're culturally significant. They belong in museums, in research institutions. They're human heritage. The number bounced around Natalie's skull, refusing to mean anything. 15 million. 20 million. She thought about Riley's inhaler, the eviction notice still taped inside her kitchen cabinet. The $67.43 in her checking account. How long for authentication? 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'll need to bring a team. We'll document everything, research provenance, run tests. Ms. Chun. Dr. Voss pulled off her gloves. "Your father, was he a collector?" "No. He was a pastor. He bought this church 30 years ago to restore it. But I remember him saying something about it being a repository once. I never knew what that meant." "The old mission church was established in 1847, Dr. Voss said slowly, running her hand along a shelf. "It served as a safe house during the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, It stored documents and valuables for safekeeping. After that, various religious organizations used it to preserve items during times of unrest, wars, depressions, local disasters. But that was supposed to end in the 1920s when the county built a proper archive. Supposed to. Clearly someone kept using it. Look at these dates. Some of these acquisitions are recent. 1990s, early 2000s. She picked up a notation card. These are your father's handwriting. Natalie looked. The shaky script matched the note in the envelope. Yes. He was documenting them. Researching. Preserving. Dr. Voss smiled. Miss Chun, your father wasn't hoarding junk in a condemned church. He was protecting priceless artifacts. He was a steward. If you're following Natalie's story, subscribe now, because what's about to happen will shake her family to its core. That afternoon, Natalie called in sick to the bakery and the takeout place. She sat in the church basement with Dr. Voss and 2 graduate students, watching them photograph and catalog. Each item had a story: a chalice used in medieval coronations, a vestment worn by a saint, a manuscript that proved heretical teachings had been more widespread than history recorded. Her phone rang. Marcus. She'd been ignoring his call since Dr. Voss arrived. Yeah. Nat, Victoria and I have been talking. That church is a hazard. We're worried about liability. If someone gets hurt on the property, they could sue the estate. We think you should let us handle the demolition. We'll cover the cost. Take it out of our inheritance. You shouldn't have to deal with it. Natalie looked at the manuscript Dr. Voss was currently examining with tears in her eyes. That's thoughtful, Marcus. But I'm keeping it. Keeping it. Natalie, be realistic. You can't afford to. I'll manage. With what money? Your 3 part-time jobs? Come on. Let us help. We'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about it. I said no. Silence. Then, you're being stubborn. Dad would want you to be practical. Dad left me this church for a reason. I'm keeping it. Goodbye, Marcus. She hung up before he could argue. Dr. Voss glanced over, eyebrow raised. Family, brother. He wants to demolish the building. Don't let him. Dr. Voss held up a small wooden box, carved with intricate designs. This was made by Shakers in 1843. One of maybe 10 surviving pieces. What you have here, it's not just money. It's memory. It's proof of how people lived, what they believed, what they valued enough to protect. Natalie thought about her father, spending weekends in this dying church while his own family wondered why he bothered. Had he known what was down here? Had he been protecting it all along? That night, she picked up Riley from the babysitter and splurged on McDonald's. Happy meal for Riley, dollar menu for herself. In their tiny apartment, Riley spread her toys across the floor while Natalie tried to explain what had happened. So Grandpa left you a church? A broken church with a secret basement. Like Batman. Sort of. There are old things in the basement. Important things. They might be worth a lot of money. Riley considered this, clutching her stuffed elephant. Are we still poor? The question hit Natalie in the chest. Right now, yes. But maybe not for long. Okay. Riley went back to her toys, the conversation already forgotten. But Natalie sat on the couch, staring at the eviction notice on the counter, and let herself imagine a different life. An apartment with 2 bedrooms. Health insurance. The ability to take Riley to a movie without checking ticket prices first. Her phone buzzed. Victoria, in the group chat. Nat, Marcus told me you're being difficult about the church. We're just trying to help. Don't be prideful. Hugs and kisses. Natalie turned off her phone. She pulled Riley close and breathed in the smell of her daughter's shampoo. The cheap kind, because the good kind was $8 a bottle. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I promise. And for the first time in 3 years, she thought it might be true. The authentication results came on a Friday. Dr. Voss called while Natalie was boxing pastries at the bakery, and her manager Linda had to cover the register because Natalie couldn't stop shaking. $17 million, Dr. Voss said. Conservative estimate. If we auction the highest value pieces and negotiate museum acquisitions for the historically significant items, you could see 20 million. Natalie sat down hard on a flour sack. Say that again. You own $17 million in authenticated religious artifacts. The Smithsonian wants the Byzantine collection. The Vatican is sending representatives next week. 3 major auction houses are preparing bids. Ms. Chun, this is the most significant private collection of early Christian artifacts discovered in North America in 30 years. Linda was staring at her. The customers were staring. Natalie walked outside into the parking lot, phone pressed to her ear. What happens now? That's your choice. We can auction everything. Fastest path to cash. Or we can be strategic. Sell some pieces privately, loan others to museums for exhibition fees, keep a few for educational purposes. I'd recommend a mix. And Miss Chen, you need a lawyer. A good one. This is complicated. Natalie thought about Marcus and Victoria, their helpful offers to deal with the church. Yeah, I definitely need a lawyer. The lawyer, Patricia Wu, referred by Dr. Voss, was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for destroying opposing counsel. She sat in Natalie's apartment that evening, Riley coloring at the kitchen table, and laid out the situation. Your siblings can't contest the will. Your father's estate was properly executed, but they'll try to argue you're mismanaging a family legacy, that the collection should be split between all three of you. They'll claim your father didn't know what was in the basement, therefore the inheritance wasn't what he intended. But he did know. He documented everything. Can you prove it? Natalie pulled out the envelope from the lawyer's office. Her father's note. The answers aren't always in the obvious places. He left me the key. Just the key. Not Marcus. Not Victoria. He knew exactly what he was doing. Patricia smiled. Good. That helps. Now what do you want? I want to keep what's mine. I want to secure my daughter's future. And, she paused, looking at Riley. I want to do something that matters. My dad protected these things for decades. They should go somewhere people can see them, learn from them. Not just sit in some rich person's private collection. Then here's my recommendation. We sell 40% at auction. That's roughly $7 million after fees and taxes. That's your security, your daughter's education, your breathing room. The rest we loan to museums on rotating exhibition. You'll get annual fees, speaking opportunities, consulting work. The church itself we renovate into an educational center focused on religious history and preservation. We establish a foundation in your father's name. Natalie's hands trembled. I could do that. You can do whatever you want. It's yours. The call to Marcus came 2 days later, after Patricia had filed paperwork and Dr. Voss had issued a press release. Natalie made it from her new phone. She'd finally replaced the one that died in the church basement. You're suing us? Marcus's voice was ice. For what? We haven't done anything. I'm not suing anyone. I'm protecting my inheritance. Your inheritance? Natalie, that collection is a family legacy. Dad would want it shared. You can't just... He left it to me, Marcus. Just me. The church, the key, everything. He knew what was down there. He spent 30 years protecting it. And he gave it to the daughter working 3 jobs to keep her kid fed, not the son with $400,000 in investments. Silence stretched across the line. You've changed, Marcus finally said. No, I just stopped letting you tell me what I'm worth. She hung up before he could respond. Victoria called 5 minutes later. Natalie let it go to voicemail. The message was 2 minutes of tearful guilt tripping about family and loyalty and how their father would be disappointed. Natalie deleted it without finishing. Some bridges were worth burning. The auction happened 3 months later at Pemberton's in New York. Natalie wore a blue dress that fit properly and sat in the front row with Riley, who had been deemed old enough to understand that their lives had changed. Dr. Voss sat to her left. Patricia Wu sat to her right. Lot 23, Byzantine chalice, circa 550 AD, provenance documented through the Old Mission Church collection. The bidding started at $500,000. It climbed fast, museums competing with private collectors, phone bidders from 3 continents. When the hammer fell at $2.3 million, Riley squeezed Natalie's hand so hard it hurt. Mom, that's so much. That's one piece, baby. We have 39 more tonight. By the evening's end, the auction total was $8.4 million. After fees and taxes, Natalie would walk away with $5.7 million. The remaining collection, already on loan to 6 different museums, would generate annual fees of roughly $400,000. The speaking engagements and consulting work Dr. Voss had arranged would add more. But the moment that mattered most came 6 weeks later, when Natalie stood at the grand opening of the Reverend Samuel Kimball Center for Religious History and Preservation. The church had been restored, not to original condition, but to safe, functional beauty. The sanctuary was an exhibition space. The basement was a climate-controlled archive. The old office had become a classroom where Dr. Voss would teach seminars. And in the center of the sanctuary, mounted on a brass plaque, was her father's note. The answers aren't always in the obvious places. He'd be proud, Dr. Voss said, standing beside her as visitors filed in. What you've built here, it's not just preservation. It's education. It's access. These pieces are being seen by people who could never afford museum admission to the Smithsonian. You're sharing history with the community that protected these items for generations. Natalie watched a group of school children gather around the Byzantine exhibit, their faces bright with curiosity. It's what he would have wanted. That night, in their new house, a 3-bedroom with a yard where Riley could play, Natalie tucked her daughter into bed with clean sheets and a bookshelf full of books they hadn't borrowed from the library. Mom, Riley's voice was drowsy. Are we rich now? Natalie thought about the foundation funding scholarships for kids whose parents worked multiple jobs. She thought about the exhibits traveling to small museums that couldn't afford major collections. She thought about her father, protecting history in a condemned church because he believed some things mattered more than money. She thought about the chalice that had sold for $2.3 million, now displayed in a museum where anyone could see it. Yes, sweetheart, we're rich, but not just because of money, because we know what's worth protecting. She turned out the light and stood in the doorway, watching Riley sleep in a room that was truly theirs. Not rented, not borrowed, not temporary. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. Marcus or Victoria? Probably. Trying once more to negotiate or guilt or demand. She deleted the notification without reading it. Outside, the moon rose over their quiet street. Inside, the house was warm and stable and safe. Natalie walked to her office, her actual home office, with a desk and proper lighting, and opened her laptop. The Foundation's website needed updates. The winter exhibition schedule needed finalizing. A university had requested her father's research notes for their theology program. She pulled up the email and started typing. She had work to do. Not the desperate scramble of survival, but the meaningful work of building something that lasted. Just like her father. Just like women who refused to mistake obvious for valuable. The church stood on Salvation Road, no longer condemned, no longer forgotten. Its doors opened to school children and scholars, to anyone who wanted to touch history. And in its basement, carefully preserved and properly documented, the remaining collection waited for its turn to be seen, to be studied, to prove that the most important things are often hidden behind locked doors in places everyone else has written off. Natalie kept one piece for herself, a simple wooden cross, and sighed, probably worthless in monetary terms. It hung in her office above her desk, a reminder that value isn't always obvious. That patient stewardship can preserve what matters most. That being overlooked isn't the same as being wrong. And that sometimes, the condemned church holds everything worth saving.